Hello, everyone, and welcome to Marvelous Movie Mondays, Triple M with K and D, Kelsey and Dill. Here, we are December 2024 officially, and we are here for our last month of season 3 of our show. We've been doing this since 2021. Is that correct, Kels?
Season,
Help me.
yes, season 3.
No, this would be season 4 then, right? Because if we've been doing this since 21,
Yeah, but
did
it's
WandaVision come out in 21? So
yes,
we did that year, 21, then we did 22, then we did 23, and now we're finishing 24. This is our end of our season 4. We begin our 5th season of the show next month. Isn't that crazy?
Oh yeah, you're right, Dill. It's totally
Yeah,
not.
like we've podcasted pretty much every week for the last 4 years. Like that is nuts if you think about it. And yet we still
Commitment.
have never we've never talked about this topic, which is Marvel MCU cameos. And we did our own separate like kind of list for Stan Lee. We did like a tier ranker, but we never talked about just like other cameos, like the people that are not credited that pop up. Obviously, some would be like more supporting roles, but just people that the marketing is kind of hid from us. So we figured as a way to ease into the final, weeks of our season, we're gonna just do a fun top 10 list for you. Just talking about Marvel cameos. Kels, anything cool happened this week with you? Anything to report? Anything new with you?
Um, I mean, the best thing I watched still stands to be Wicked. I've been watching a lot of like those sappy Christmas movies that Netflix has been releasing with my mom,
Mm,
and they're just like you watch them to for you turn your brain off and you just like it's
right.
like reading a little sappy little romance book or taking in a guilty pleasure. It's nothing revolutionary is happening, but they still make you feel good inside, get you in the holiday spirit.
Gotcha. Any highlights to report there? I've heard Hot Frosty's a popular one, but I've heard it's also pretty bad. Have you seen that one?
I I saw some bits and pieces of Hot Frosty when my mom
Mm,
was watching it the other night, and they're silly, they're goofy, if you
mm.
as long as you don't take them too seriously, like they're a good time, I think.
Gotcha. Any of your favorites of that bunch to report? Any standouts?
Well, we just watched what's it called? Our Little Secret last night. And it's just always a pleasure to see Lindsay Lohan act in something because she was
Oh,
like
that was
such a
her. Okay,
staple, I
gotcha.
feel, from our
Hmm.
childhood that I just
Yeah,
like love to see her like pop up again in things.
cool.
Cuz she's just lovely.
Great. I love that. Yeah, I got to get back into the Christmas groove. Now that it's officially December, I feel comfortable saying, okay, I'll put away the turkey, move on, and let's say hi to Santa because I am one that usually delays because Thanksgiving is one of my favorite holidays, so it's like I always try to delay it as much as possible before I go full fledged, Mariah Carey thawed Christmas
Yeah.
season. But yeah, like my restaurant's been playing the music, so I'm like, you know what, it's that time. So I'm gonna start to do that probably starting tonight after we record this. Put on something. I don't tend to go for all the new stuff because I tend to revisit all my favorite stuff. And then by the time I'm done revisiting, it's December 25th, and then I'm like, oh, great, like it's
Yeah.
already over. But I will try
Right.
to be better about watching some new stuff just so we can kind of do our little check-ins on some Netflix or Hallmarks. I don't know if you saw the Hallmark movies last, or I guess 2 nights ago now. They released the Taylor Swift Travis Kelsey movie on Hallmark, but like very little advertisements for it. But I got to check that one out too because it has like a very holiday vibe to it. At least the poster does. But I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
full fledged holiday movie or not. Have you seen that one yet as a Swifty?
I haven't. There's actually 2 movies, I'm pretty sure, that have now taken on this concept of like pop star and football player get into like a
Gotcha.
whirlwind romance. I think one of them was made by Netflix, one of them is, as you said, made by Hallmark. And I
Yeah.
just remember seeing clips of it on TikTok and like I forget which one it was, either the Netflix or the Hallmark one, but they just use so many of her like song titles in their dialogue.
Oh,
Like
I hate
they'll be
that.
like, all too well that this
Oh no
guy
no no
isn't the
no no
right
no
one
no
for
no no no
you.
no no
Like,
no no
and
no.
it just like exactly, dude. Like it gives me the
Oh
heebie-jeebies. So as
oh
much as like I'm obviously a Taylor Swift fan, I'm like, do we need this? If we're
yeah
gonna do it, like at least let's like do it well. Like let's not be corny about it, I guess.
yeah.
But
Yeah, no,
I
yeah, I just imagine her just like going up. She's like, I'm a fearless person, and he's like, well, I got a tight end. I'm like, oh no,
Right,
Yeah, no, I
exactly.
just I can't. But I have heard I think they are being overt though. I think like it is about the two of them, if I'm not mistaken. Like I don't even think they changed the
Mm,
characters' names for the Hallmark one. Like I think it is about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey. Like the poster, it's very much his jersey. But I don't know. Maybe it's one of those rights issues where they don't say it, but like everyone kind of knows it. I don't know.
yeah.
I will probably check it out just out of curiosity, and I will report back to you, and maybe you'll see it, and we could like talk about it next week because I'm just like I'm puzzled and perplexed by it. Yeah, didn't really watch much this week. I did catch up on some Oscar movies. I watched Conclave, the newest film with Ray
Yeah.
Fiennes. It's about this group of popes basically trying to appoint, or cardinals trying to appoint the new pope after the pope dies, and it's really
Yeah.
interesting. It actually has a lot of like relevancy to like just political elections and stuff like that, and just the idea of like electing people and the conversations that come up with like race and with sexual assault and also transgender themes, which I didn't expect. So like really cool ideas that like I feel like if you're just like you're very like conservative Christian going into this movie, you're probably going to get pissed off, and I think that's cool that we have movies like that that can kind of just
Mm,
like shine a mirror on society and be like, this is the way it is now, and like let's try to be more progressive in the way we think about things. But I think the conversation around it is slightly more exciting than the movie itself. It's a lot slower and a lot more drab than I expected, but that is the vibe, that is the tone. I was expecting kind of like a high tense thriller the way it was advertised, but I liked it. It's going to be nominated for a bunch of Oscars, so I'm glad I got to see it ahead of the curve in a theater. But the problem is also it is the quietest movie of the year, and I was in the Cranford Theater, very tiny theater, but on the left was Moana 2, on the right was Wicked, and every single scene there was some song creeping in, to where I was watching this
mm,
somber drama about popes electing the next pope, and I just hear like how far, not how far I'll go because Lynn didn't write the music, but like the Moana sounds, and then like another scene I'll hear like the
yeah.
Defy Gravity riff, and I'll be like, you know what, it is what it is. It's the magic of the movies, but that's one I definitely recommend for people, even though I don't think it's as much of like a wow, this deserves Best Picture as some other films I've seen this year or other years. But I do think it's a safe bet for a nomination for Best Picture. So that'll be something you're going to hear a lot of people talking about in the next few months as Oscar season creeps up on us. But I got to really get back into like the swing of watching Oscar movies now because I watch a lot of Halloween movies, going to watch a lot of Christmas movies, but I need to remember like, oh yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming out that's going to be up for Oscars that I need to check out. So yeah,
Yeah, Dale. I actually just remembered I first of all, I've heard nothing but good things about Conclave. So
yeah,
I'm excited to check that one out. And
yeah, definitely
also
do.
I did remember I watched because it was really late. Oh, the night of Thanksgiving, I watched Out of My Mind on Disney Plus.
Ooh, I don't know
The
what that is.
It's a Disney Plus original about a girl who has cerebral palsy, so she's
Hmm,
nonverbal. So
yeah.
her inside thoughts are narrated by Jennifer Aniston, and because
Oh,
I she's like, I can sound like anyone I want, and I picked Jennifer Aniston. And
cool.
so it's like Jennifer Aniston being like fully being Jennifer Aniston. It takes place in 2002, and it's kind of like about her journey of like trying to communicate with people and like the different kind of technological advances that are available to her at the time to allow her to communicate and be in kind of like a um neurotypical classroom, because she
Hmm.
starts in kind of like a special ed kind of room, and then because she can learn, she just like is nonverbal, so she wants to, obviously like learn and be a part of the conversation, and it was just very, very heartwarming. I did cry a lot.
Oh, good. I'll have to check that. I didn't know this existed, but I think I remember
Yeah,
reading the book or something way back when. Because I
yeah,
looked at the poster on Disney Plus. I haven't even seen this advertised on Disney Plus. Disney Plus does that where they just drop shit on there and don't tell people about it. Netflix does
yeah,
the same. So, especially
yeah.
with Jennifer Aniston in it, Rosemary DeWitt, Judith Light. Yeah, I got to check this out. I'm adding it to my watch list right now. I'll hopefully watch that at least by the end of this month. Cool. Looks great. Yeah, thank you for that recommendation. I love that when like the best thing you watch is something no one else has, and it's like
Yeah,
yeah, like you can be that first one to like kind of set the ball rolling for that. So,
it's a
very cool. I'll have to
tearjerker.
check it out. Out of My
And
Mind, right?
then yes, Out of My Mind. And then something I started watching on Disney Plus to kind of like lighten the mood a little bit was I started watching the assembled episode of Deadpool and Wolverine.
Nice.
And it's very long, so I only got about
Mhm.
like halfway through. And it was um, it was interesting to hear about like how much how apart Ryan Reynolds is of like how much how what am I trying to say? Ryan
How
Reynolds is
involved he
very
is in
much
the process.
yes, how involved he is in like every
Mm.
single process of the film. For better or for worse, like he
Yeah.
pays attention to every single little line delivery, every joke gets messed with up until like literally the film is released. Like, him and Sean Levy are even there like listening to the music get made and giving critiques about like what, you know, instruments should be and like shouldn't be, like, they're just very
Right.
meticulous about how the whole thing like went down. And it got me wondering, Dill. I'm like, where is the assembled piece on Agatha All Along? Because I feel like they usually come out
Mm.
rather quickly, and Agatha
Yeah, I
All
don't know.
Along has been over for quite some time, and I really hope that they didn't over overlook this, and I
Yeah, I
really
don't
hope
know.
that it's coming.
I wonder because it's like it's Marvel Television and not Marvel Studios. Maybe they're just not making one
Mm.
for Agatha. But did they make one for the Guardians holiday special? Do you remember?
Oh,
Or
that's a
for
good
Werewolf by
point. And
Night? Because I think those two were also kind of like the special presentation things. I'm wondering if they don't have
they
them for those.
They definitely made one for Werewolf by Night because I remember
Okay,
watching it, but
gotcha.
I don't know about the Guardian special, which makes me
All right,
think
well,
maybe you're right.
yeah, maybe we'll investigate and find out next week. Maybe it's just taking a little while. It's been exactly a month now since on the day of recording because November
Yeah,
only has 30 days in it, so it's been exactly a month since Halloween. So yeah, we'll have to find out in the next week. I'll try to research and let us know and update us on that because I know you love watching those. I haven't watched a bunch of them. I think I watched the WandaVision one. That's it. But yeah, I
yeah.
should go back and like just marathon those because I think it would give me a greater sense of appreciation for the craft because I feel like sometimes the final product is very studio overridden that like there's still so much that goes on that's very beautiful. I felt that way kind of watching a lot of the Wicked behind the scenes because I don't love the aesthetic
Mm,
of it, but I think just seeing the actual colors and the sets just in front of you without any of that saturation on top, I was like, wow, this is like really stunning. So um,
yeah,
yeah, I think when you look at something in the final product, it almost makes some of the other design elements look less. So I definitely want to check that out because that's been one of my main kind of criticisms for all these movies is the actual like studio quality look of them all.
yeah,
They look kind of pumped through the same kind of filter, but very cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that one out. Deadpool and Wolverine. I like Ryan Reynolds, so I'm excited to watch that one. That behind the scenes. Speaking of behind the scenes, some things that we don't hear a lot about are the cameos. Marvel does a pretty good
yeah.
job keeping cameos under wraps. Fantastic Four First Steps just finished wrapping production 3 days ago, and not a single leak has come out from the sets, so that's pretty cool. And for the most part, that tends to be the norm. Marvel keeps things very well under wraps. So we're going to be talking about the top 10 appearances, or I guess we'll call them cameos, but some of them are obviously extended cameos. Some of them are supporting roles. It's just they wanted to keep it a secret from us. There's one in particular that is quite literally like the third, fourth main characters in their movies. But we kind of took a spirit of like, okay, we didn't know these characters were going to show up in the movie, and then they showed up. That's kind of the angle we're going at with some of these cameos. My number 9 and 10 are both people that I knew would show up in the movies, just not how and when. So that's kind of why they're
Okay.
9 and 10 on my list. The other top 8 are all just like surprises. Like we had no idea they were coming, and when they did, it was like a great reaction. It's the stuff we go to the Marvel movies to see. If the quality of the movie isn't the best, it's for the surprises and the atmosphere of the crowd and all that stuff. So we kind of discussed off air how we were going to do this, but that was kind of my parameter, was like what was the most surprising and what actually influenced the movie. It wasn't just like a sight gag or whatever, but actually like made the movie better. Is kind of how I went about it. But Kelsey, how did you go about it? Did you set any parameters for yourself in crafting your list?
Um, well, I kind of just went like well, what I did too was I started just trying to think, but like sometimes it's really hard to think of like every single scene in a movie,
Right.
especially if you
Oh
haven't
yeah.
seen it in a while. So what
Especially
I
not remembering who was credited or wasn't. Like there was one that I was like, was he part of the announcement? Like, did people know he was showing up? So I left him off my list.
right.
And I don't know if he'll be on your list, so I don't want to say it now. But I was like, I don't know if this person counts because I really don't remember if people knew he was coming in this one. Like stuff like that.
Yeah. And so I just went to IMDb and I literally IMDb'd every Marvel project and I went down the list. And if a name like stood out to me, a name and a character stood out, and I was like, oh yeah, that guy was, they showed up here. And so I like wrote it down. And then once I got like a big old list of probably like 20 plus names, I narrowed it down to 10.
Cool. All right. Well, Kels, do you want to kick us off or do you want me to kick it off? I think I should probably kick it off because my number 10 is a little bit of a cheat, if you will. So I
Okay.
think I'm going to go with number 10. And at
All
number
right.
10, we did a whole separate tier list on this guy, but I felt like it was just like, it was right to include him on the list. So at number 10, I gave the
Okay.
honorary 10 spot to Stan Lee, just
Okay.
as a way of saying, like, you know what? We know he's coming in in every movie until his passing, unfortunately. But like, we knew he was coming in every movie, but it was still a fun surprise, just kind of figuring
Hmm.
out when and where he would show up. But I think because we've already kind of talked about his cameos at nauseum, I didn't want to like fill up the top 10 list with different Stan Lee cameos. I wanted to kind of honor the overall project, but I also felt weird making a cameos list and not putting him on there. So I was like, you know what? I'll
Yeah.
put him at the 10 slot and just kind of like, this is the encompassment of all of his cameos at number 10, just because he is the king of the cameos. But I think the top 9 are all bigger surprises because we didn't necessarily know they were going to be in their movies. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to give Stan Lee that shout out as my like number 10 definitive, like, there we go, like kicking off the list with Stan Lee, just to kind of give him his respect, give him his flowers, if you will. So that's my number 10 is Stan Lee in everything, but obviously you know my favorite. It's the Tony Stank is probably my favorite, but yeah, he's got so many good ones, and I don't
Right.
honestly remember what our favorite ended up being after that tier list. It might have been the Excelsior moment, it might have been the haircut, the barber. I don't remember what exactly our number one was. Maybe it was the Captain America Winter Soldier one with the suit.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there were a lot of good ones, but I don't remember what our kind of end all be all number one was. But either way, he just kind of encompasses the bottom of my list here at 10.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't remember our favorite either. But
Okay.
I will say mine is kind of like, I feel like I wanted to give, with my number 10, I wanted to give credit where credit was due. And even though I didn't experience this in real time in 2008, I know this is probably a big deal for comic book fans everywhere. And that is when Nick Fury shows up at the end of Iron Man and
Mhm.
says, like, hey, I'm putting together a team. Want you to come join. So yeah, that's my number 10.
Yeah, it's on my list. We'll talk about it later, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's an iconic cameo for
Cool,
that reason.
cool,
But we'll chat about it a little later. All right, I'll
cool.
go with my number 9. Which is this is the other one where like I knew this person was going to show up in this movie because this person shows up in all this director's movies. I just didn't know how and when, and it's a very fun cameo, and that is Bruce Campbell in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I obviously knew he was going to show up because he's in every Sam Raimi
Oh,
movie. Yeah, he's in every
I
Sam
was
Raimi
thinking
movie.
sorry,
What were
you
you
said
thinking?
Bruce, so I was immediately like Bruce Banner, and then I was like, when the fuck is Hulk in Multiverse of
No, no,
Madness?
no,
So
no.
I was like
No, so
trying to
Bruce
think
Campbell
Bruce Campbell.
as yeah, I have actor names here, so like that might be a little confusing, but I have
Okay,
like Bruce
gotcha.
Campbell. I'll just say the character as Pizza Papa in Doctor Strange. I think it's because we knew he was coming because he's a Sam Raimi guy. Sam Raimi puts him in all his movies, but I didn't really necessarily know how. And you know, with the multiverse, I was always a little disappointed that they didn't visit more multiverses. Like this is the whole premise, and you're only going like 3 or 4 universes. There's a montage through a bunch of different ones, but I like how in this world they were like, all right, let's have Bruce Campbell be the one who introduces the weird pizza thing. Like that's the weirdest the movie got. But like, hey, you know what? It's a fun little cameo. I like how he kind of had his hand attack him like Evil Dead. I think there was some kind of richness to that cameo that wasn't just a sight gag, but like actually kind of was an homage to Bruce Campbell's career and Sam Raimi, you know, because Sam Raimi wanted to kind of have his stamp even within the studio process. So I love seeing Bruce Campbell, so I had to give him his due. It's a fun cameo. It's not like anything revolutionary, but he does come back at the credits or the post credits. So yeah, I thought it was a fine number 9 to kind of kick off the actual meat of this list. Even though the top 8 were complete surprises, this one not as much a surprise, but just when we saw him, I was still like, ah, good, good, they got him in there. So that was
Yeah.
my number 9.
No, Dill, it was definitely one of the names I wrote down as well. Definitely one of the people I considered for my list. I did end up going with a different person from Multiverse of Madness, so we'll
Okay,
talk about that later.
I will say right now, there are 2 movies I did double up on, so there will be another
Oh,
Multiverse of Madness. Yeah, I didn't play my 1 movie per thing rule because there are some movies that just don't
okay.
have them. Like Black
Sure.
Panther, for example, doesn't really have anything. Like there's certain movies,
Yeah.
unless it does, and I'm forgetting. But like there's like certain movies where it's like these are the characters you're introduced to, and that's kind of it. And any other supporting characters you kind of knew were coming. So
Yeah.
this is kind of just like, oh. like if Doctor Strange had multiple, which it did, I put them both on. So
No, I definitely did try to pick one from different projects. So
cool.
I guess I did have parameters for myself
There
to
you go.
answer
I love
your
it. I love
earlier
it. I love
question.
hearing everyone's like rules on making top tens because they are just our top tens. It can be whatever you want. What's your
Yeah.
number 9, Kels?
My number 9 is a little unconventional because it's not someone who we anticipated on being in the MCU, and we don't and they'll probably won't be a part of the MCU ever again, but it was very fun for us, me and you, as theater people to see this person show up in the MCU, and that is Adam Pascal in Hawkeye.
Oh my god. I'll be completely honest, I didn't think of TV. That is such a good one. That is such a great
Yeah.
one. Wow. Okay. For Rogers the Musical.
Yeah, I have the 3. No, I have 4. I have 4 TVs
Shit.
in
All right. Well,
here.
this is gonna be fun.
Um,
This is gonna be fun. I totally didn't even think of TV because I was like, yeah, TV has cameos, of course.
yeah.
That's such a great pick. I love that pick. Yeah, that was such a great.
Thank you.
Now that you're talking about it, I'm like, yeah, it's one of the best cameos ever because we're just like,
Right?
oh my god, it's Adam Pascal. Yeah, that's so cool. Oh,
Because
awesome.
he's not like, he wasn't a character, and like he's still just like playing like Broadway actor who's in this show. But it was just it's fun to see people that you recognize from Broadway in something as niche
And
as the Hawkeye TV series.
right, and getting to do a Broadway style number too. It's not like you're just having him walk by; like he's performing. Like that's
Yeah.
so good, Kels. I love that. Oh, good,
Thank
good,
you.
cool. All right, nothing else to add. That was awesome. Number 8. This is kind of a character because we don't see the actor. It's an animated character. So this one I didn't write an actor name down. I wrote a character, and that is Howard the
Okay.
Duck in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Cool.
And I think it's just because I like this is another one that it's like it doesn't really change the movie, but it does also kind of remind us that like there's nothing that's dead in the Marvel universe. Anything could be popular, anything could be a hit. And like Howard the Duck, the movie we watched it was terrible and like it wasn't a hit. But it was just cool that like in this movie that everyone was already calling like Guardians of the Galaxy is stupid. It's gonna be bad. Like no one knows who these characters are. I love how they became essentially the most popular characters in the MCU, and they got 3 movies and a holiday special, and they were a big part of the Avengers movies. And Howard the Duck got to be in that movie as well as kind of like you know what, nothing's ever gone. Like there's always a chance, you can bring these characters back and find a way to get them in there somehow. So I like that Howard the Duck is in it. I think it's a fun little gag to all the people who were there from like the OG Marvel days, as we've been covering from our first Avenger files. We just got to the 80s in that series, and like that was kind of when a lot of people did discover Marvel through Howard the Duck, sadly, if that's your introduction. But yeah, it was just kind of a fun way to kind of just like say, you know what, we're not ashamed of all the other characters that aren't as popular. We're gonna embrace them and we're gonna make them part of our cool, like kind of criminal underworld. And we see him again in What If, and it's great. And Seth Green does a great job. So I wanted to give
Yeah.
Howard the Duck his respect because I also it's not a huge like call attention to it moment, but it is a really good moment if you know who Howard the Duck is or you at least know of Howard the Duck. Seeing him in the movie, you're like, oh, that's great. Even if you don't know who he is, it's like, oh, that duck, like how funny, he's smoking a cigar. He's like a Hugh Hefner
Yeah.
duck. So
Right.
I just think that in and of itself is very charming. So that was my number 8.
Yeah, Dill. Howard the Duck is my number 7, so not too
Oh,
far off.
cool. Oh, all
Yes.
right. This is like really
Um
fun. I like this list. Wow.
um Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, Dill, the Howard the Duck we get in the MCU is kind of like way cooler than the Howard the Duck from the movie. Like I feel like he's just got like so much going on. He's much more spastic in the movie, but in like the MCU, like he's cool, he's slick, he like flirts with he flirts who is it that he flirts with in What If?
Nebula.
Darcy.
Oh, Darcy. Yeah, yeah.
Darcy in the Thor episode when Thor's like
Mhm,
acting like a
mhm.
frat boy. And yeah, I feel like if it weren't for James Gunn kind of like including him in Guardians, like I don't think, that anyone else in the MCU would have thought to include him in any way. So it's just like
Right.
really cool that, this one moment from Guardians has now branched into like him literally being in Endgame and What If and all these things.
Yeah.
So shout out James Gunn.
Awesome. There we go. Shout out Seth Green and James Gunn. All right, Kels, what is your number 8?
My number 8 is Evan Peters in WandaVision. Um,
I love how
it
I forgot to do TV and you hate this moment in this character and yet you put him on your list.
Okay, well, that's why he's close to the bottom because, I wasn't obsessed with it because of what it became, but, like, it still was really
Yeah.
cool. Like, think
Mhm.
about the moment in that episode when she opens the door and it's literally for who we thought at the time was Peter Maximoff, you know what I mean? Like, that
Oh,
was
yeah.
super cool, and I was, like, reliving that feeling, and then and then it was cool to, make a callback to that moment and have him t turn up in Agatha All Along, you know? Do you think he'll turn up in anything else down the line?
I have no idea at this point. Like I didn't
Never
even
say.
realize he would. I didn't think he would make it beyond that one episode. Like I really yeah they made him a big part of that final episode of WandaVision. And yeah, as you said, in Agatha. So I don't know. Yeah, this one is one that I think yeah, like if I were to do this list right after that episode aired before the next one aired, this would be my number one. But it's like one of those things where
Right.
now in retrospect, I just don't have the same like excitement for it watching it back. Also, I don't watch the shows a lot back as much as you do. Like I watch more of the movies. And even then, I don't watch
Sure.
those a lot. So it's like it's just not one that has stuck with me. But now thinking about all the TV, like that is one of the more iconic TV cameos for sure. Especially because it's also the first big cameo we get really in WandaVision. Like the first like
Mhm.
big massive like whoa they brought him back. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's good. It's a good pick. Um,
Thank you.
cool. Number 7, it's actually funny. 7 and 6 are the same guy for me, same actor. And it's funny because this actor, I feel like his character of all of them pops up in so many of these things. So I'm going with Mr. Cap himself, Mr. Chris Evans. And at number 7, I'm going with Thor the Dark World when Loki turns into Cap. Again, it's a great visual gag. It keeps us in the universe, reminded that this is all connected, but it is merely a visual gag. So I didn't want to put in my top half, whereas like these top 6 are like really like they're fun. But yeah, I
Yeah.
thought this was such a playful little, just very minute little cameo. But sometimes the best cameos are that where it's just so brief, blink and you miss it. I almost put Brad Pitt from Deadpool 2 in there until I remembered that's not officially MCU. The
Mm.
Vanisher or the what was the Vanisher or the
The
Invisible Man or
Vanisher.
whatever. Yeah, when he like gets
Yeah.
electrocuted and you see him in a split second, like stuff like that. Where like I love when it's just like a very very quick moment, but also because Chris Evans does kind of embody Loki in that moment. He kind of has a different swagger about him as Cap. I think that makes for a fun cameo as well. Just seeing him kind of put a little twist on something we already know. So,
Yeah.
Chris Evans, number 7, Thor: The Dark World. But we will hear
Oh,
from him again at number 6 because I have him at number 6 as well.
that's a good pick, Jill. I didn't even think of that. See, I didn't there was also a point where, like, I didn't go back too far because at a certain point I realized that, like, well, there's not gonna be a ton of cameos, like, early on because they didn't,
Hmm.
have all these characters to work with
Right.
yet. So I think I stopped, like, at some point in, like, phase 3, um, in my research, and so I didn't even think of that about this one, and that's a really cool moment for sure.
Cool.
Um,
Um, your number
my
7, you
number
already
7
said, was
was
Howard the Duck.
Howard the Duck. So you're
Right. So I'll
number
go back.
6.
Yeah, I'll go back to number 6, and we'll continue along the Chris Evans train. I'm thinking
Okay.
this might be your pick for this movie. I have 2 from Deadpool and Wolverine. One of them is here at
Okay.
number 6, and it is Chris Evans as Johnny Storm. I thought this was such a fun reveal, obviously kind of hyping it up to be that, he is Cap, but then he kind of says flame on, and it's that subversion of expectation. The problem is this is the one spoiler that was leaked to me before we saw it. So this was the
Mm,
one cameo that I wasn't like, what? Like I was just like, "Yeah, okay, cool. Like that's an awesome way to do it." But it didn't hit as
yeah.
hard because I did know it was coming. But it is
Okay.
a really well done bit and it's a really great moment. It's a great way to get Cap in and or Chris Evans in, and he gets to have a lot of fun also in the scenes subsequently, when he gets killed, and then in the post credits when you kind of see the reverse flashback thing. Like I think he just has such fun in this role. And for a role for a character that's not really well loved or well known, really, like everyone's just kind of like, whatever. Like he's probably everyone's favorite in Fantastic Four member, but what does that mean? Like
Yeah.
um and even then, I'd probably put him at my number 3. Like, I like Invisible Woman and The Thing more, but yeah, I think it was a cool moment for fans of those movies, the very few there are, and also just Chris Evans fans, Cap fans, Deadpool fans. It just seemed like it kind of ticked all the boxes of like what you want a cameo to be, and like the way it was used in the movie was just very effective. And it's the first kind of big cameo we see in that movie. I mean, Happy Hogan, sure, but like that was like a really big moment, and that's like the first
Yeah.
huge moment in that movie. So, got to give it its due.
Yeah, Dill, we're definitely gonna talk about that one later.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I figured.
And actually, fun fact, this was a moment that they did talk about in the first half of the assembled episode that I watched, and apparent like Chris Evans straight up told Ryan Reynolds, like, you can only use me in this film as long as like the post credit scene where he says all of that nonsense like stays in the final cut of the film. He was like that. I'm only like signing off as long as this stays in. Like that's part of this. And Ryan
I love
Reynolds was
that.
like, deal, done. You
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah, you can't
Um,
lose that cameo because it's so good. Like, what are you gonna have Jessica
yeah,
Alba show up? Like, like I
yeah,
don't
of
think it would have
course.
worked as well. I think it's because he's done both roles that it works so well. But we'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it later.
Yeah.
What's your number 6?
My number 6 is a little bit of a stretch. You can tell me if it doesn't count, but it's actually a reveal at the end of another TV show where we find out that there is not one, not two, but three different personalities living inside of one actor, and that is Oscar Isaac as Jake Lockley.
I'll count it because he's playing a new character that you didn't think would show up. I think if you know Moon Knight well, that is not a surprise. Like people think it's coming, but like
Okay.
we didn't know, so I think it was kind of a fun
Yeah.
cameo. Yeah, it's hard because it's like I thought about it as actor cameos, whereas you're more
Sure.
character cameos. But it is
Yeah.
a character cameo. It is a character we didn't end up seeing until the very end of the show as a little teaser.
Yeah.
So yeah, why not? I think it would count. Jake Lockley,
Thank you.
sure. I
I
like it.
mean,
That's a cool, inspired pick.
I just love Moon Knight so much. I think that it's so good, and like I will never stop. I will never not praise the work Oscar Isaac did in that show, and so I wanted to represent it in some way. And this was surprising for me. There were some other, MCU kind of like influencers, if you will, like, throwing out this theory of this other character coming in. And I was like, who's that? I don't know. And so when I experienced it, I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Because I also just love that it sets up such a cool, next chapter for him. And like just it opens up doors to more possibilities because I love Oscar Isaac and I love the character of Mark Spector and well, oh my god, I almost said Ethan. Stephen
Steven.
Grant.
Yeah, I got you.
Stephen Grant. And now a third. So I'm
Hmm.
I'm so excited to see what happens next for them.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a very cool idea. Yeah, I didn't think of that. I thought more actors and characters, but now I'm looking at my number 5, and it is a character-based cameo. So I'm
Okay.
chewing my what is it? Eating my own tail or whatever. I don't know the phrase.
Eating my
Um,
own words.
words maybe. No, isn't there like stuck a foot in your mouth or something? I don't know the phrase. I
Sticking your
combined.
foot in your mouth is like saying something you shouldn't have said. Like, oh, aren't
Yeah,
you pregnant? Oh, was I not supposed to say that?
okay, so maybe not that extreme, but like I was like, I shouldn't have said that because now I'm about to break that own rule. Because at number
Gotcha.
5, I have it's kind of a cheat, but I have the Illuminati as a whole in Doctor Strange 2,
Oh,
which
okay.
I
Cool.
imagine we're gonna have some crossover coming up. But like, I do think this is one where like I don't really want to say John Krasinski is the pick because like I saw him and I was like, whoa, but then they didn't really do much with him to where I was like really excited about it. But also,
Sure.
and also, he's not our fantastic, so it's just purely like a wink to the fans who wanted it, but then they kill him. I think Lashana Lynch was cool, but it's also like we've seen her character in other MCU things, so it's not as much of like a whoa. It was really just Patrick Stewart, but even then, having just seen Logan, I'm like, do I really need to see Professor X again? Like, it's the same thing with Logan with Wolverine, Deadpool Wolverine. I'm like, we have that perfectly closed chapter to where like all of
Yeah.
them together was a cool moment. Captain Carter as well, and oh, you're gonna have to help me out on his name, the one that bursts, his head bursts.
Black Bolt.
Black Bolt. Yeah, like those were all cool. I think as a collective, I think seeing them together is what makes it a great cameo because you're getting all these little nods and winks of like different things. Like, oh, this is for What If Captain Carter. Oh, this is like for people saying they want more black superheroes with Captain Marvel. Oh, here's an X-Men. Oh, here's a fan cast Fantastic Four. Like, I think all of them together works better than they do on their own. So I wanted to kind of encompass them together here, right in the middle of the list at number 5. But it is a great moment. It is a good reveal. With the nature of the multiversal plot, that you're going to get at least some cameos from different
Mm,
universes and properties. And I thought it was cool that they took some that were pre-existing properties like Captain Carter who already existed in animation and brought her into live action. It was cool to get like other cast members in other people's roles, which they did with Lashana Lynch. They put her in a different role. And I liked how they had like just purely new castings and old castings from other movies. Like it was kind of, they ticked every box in the cameo box. And they got to kill them all off anyway, so it was kind of this fun, like it was literally a cameo. There's no long lasting effect here. It was just simply they're here and they're
Right.
out. So I kind of
Yeah.
appreciated that. Though I think my top four are more just like iconic cameos. I think this one was fitting for the middle of my list here at number five.
That is so funny, Dill, because I, for my number 5, have a member of the Illuminati.
Hmm.
And so
I wonder which one
I
it is.
I also thought of obviously John Krasinski first. I mean, I thought it was cool that like the fans had kind of had him as a fan cast for Reed Richards, and then he showed up in this kind of format. So like I was like, oh, that's really cool. And then like Lashana Lynch we see as Captain Marvel. Cool to think of her in that light. Obviously, I was so excited to see Captain Marvel like go from animation to being like full fledged, like
Captain
all
Carter,
like
you mean? Yeah.
nearly. What did I say?
You said Captain Marvel, but they're both great captains.
Oh,
So
Cap
yeah, it's fine.
yes, Captain Carter, excuse
Yeah,
me.
yeah, I got you.
Um, Captain Carter go from animation to like pretty much being canon in the MCU. Because obviously, like, yay, women. But I think the character that did it for me was Professor X. And I think the reason why I was so excited to see him specifically was because I loved the idea of like making some kind of branch in between the X-Men and the MCU and kind of
Hmm.
like, opening up this possibility for mutants and the X-Men and,
Yeah,
all these different things now. And I think that was the most exciting thing for me. Also, I think that he got the longest screen time out of the
yeah,
group of
because he
them.
does most of the talking. Yeah,
Yeah, he does most of the talking, and he has that whole thing where he like goes inside Wanda's head and he tries to save the real Wanda, and then he has a real brutal death. I mean, they all have a pretty brutal death. Who do you
yeah.
think is the worst? I have my
Um,
answer.
the one I would like the least would be the spaghetti. Just getting
Okay.
unfurled with spaghetti. Oh, you know what
Yeah,
though? Black Bolts
that'd
is
be
really
tough.
bad. Black Bolts is really bad.
But it's quick though.
Well, yeah, that's how I feel about Captain Carter as well. It's just like the shield shoot slice. And then like,
Oh, so no, that's
is
my
that the
pick
one?
for worst.
Okay.
You get sliced in half, dude. Oh my god, that's the worst one for me, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, they're all pretty bad.
But getting
Yeah, go ahead.
spaghettied is pretty bad as well, because that he was like conscious for
Right,
most of
that's my
that.
thing. Is like you would feel yourself on twirling, whereas like
Yeah,
every other death is very quick. It's like crushed by this, sliced in half, broke your neck, exploded your head. Everything else
yeah.
is quick. That's the one that's not. But I mean, they all suck. But maybe you would feel the slice in half because maybe you'd. I don't know. I don't know. I don't
I
want to think
think
about
you'd
it.
I think you would feel the initial slice, but then I think your like body would just be going through so much trauma that you probably just go numb.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, probably. I hope we never have to experience that. But I will say
Yeah, no.
another thing for Professor X is also you get to see now that we've seen the animated series, seeing his classic yellow kind of
The
whatever it's called,
chair.
vestibule. Yeah, chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what am I thinking of? Vestibule.
Vestibule.
What am I don't
His
know.
moped.
Yeah, his chair. I think that's
What's that
also adds to the cameo for sure.
What's the name of the thing that cleans the ice in an ice skating rink?
The Zamboni.
The Zamboni, his Zamboni.
Yeah, there you go. All right, it's up to me now. Number four, you just did your number five, right?
Yes, you're number
Okay,
4.
this I keep saying that these ones have more impact, but now that I'm looking at it, this is just purely a visual gag that I love. But it is
Okay.
the king of cameos. He's a cameo in Interstellar. He's a cameo in the Euro Trip movie. He's a cameo in so many movies, and it is Mr. Matt Damon in Thor Ragnarok. That whole
Oh,
kind of recurring gag of the theater troupe, because we also see in Love and Thunder with like Melissa McCarthy, and we see Sam Neill, and like I think all of them together. And what is it, Luke Hemsworth or Liam Hemsworth? I forget which one. Um,
Liam.
the one who's not Gale. Because there's three. It's like Thor, then there's
Okay.
Gale, then the third brother
Wait,
is the.
this whole time I thought it was Liam. It's not. It's Luke.
I don't know. It's whoever's not Gale. I don't remember which one's
Luke.
Gale. Is it Luke or Liam?
Liam is Gale.
Okay, so it was Luke. Luke is
So
the
Luke is
fake
the one
Thor.
that does the.
Yeah. Yeah, but I love that.
Blowing
I
my
love that,
mind.
you're kinda getting these other castings. It's very silly. It's very much a very blink or you miss it thing. But I like that. I love the idea of the fact that there are actors who play these roles in the universe itself, on stage. So, this is kind of my version of the Adam Pascal one. But it's just funny because it is Matt Damon, who's such an A-lister, and it's like, a lot of people are wondering if he's ever gonna have a role in the MCU, and it is this, like, play Loki, which I think is just so funny. It's such a cool, like, little thing, for him, for such a big actor to do. So, number 4, the top 3 for me were very definitive, but, this is my number 4. How about you?
Yeah. That's another good one that I didn't think of, Dill. My number 4 is definitely not a visual gag. It's definitely a more serium. Okay. I combined the words serious and seldom in my
Oh,
mouth and I got serium.
the
So it's a
Super
very
Soldier Serum.
this exactly. It's a very much more serious, much more seldom moment in this movie. And it is like you were saying before, Dill, an actor that shows up in this director's movies all the time. And I thought this is where you were going before. And I was like, oh my God, that's so low for this actor because I feel like we both love this actor and this character
I'm worried
so
that I'm
much.
not gonna have him now, and now I feel dumb, but okay, go
It's
ahead.
all right. Um, it is when Killmonger shows up in Black Panther Wakanda Forever and is the ancestor that greets Shuri when she gets the Black Panther, the herb.
Yeah, no, it's a great pick. I after the fact, I kinda looked at some lists to see if I forgot anything,
Mm,
and this was on there. That is a good point. I think it's satisfying because he's in every Ryan Coogler movie, so it's like you still get to be. But for
yeah.
me, and it was also cool for a moment for Shuri to kind of resist the evil, but I also
Mhm.
that movie just I haven't really thought much about lately. Like I just think it's kind of like
Hmm.
come and gone from my brain. I think because it is so solemn, but also still trying to be this rejuvenation. But like I don't know, it's just not a movie that lingered with me quite as much to where that moment was cool, but not like one that I've personally been like, wow, like they brought Killmonger back. Also because it is only the second movie, you know,
Yeah.
I get it. You see this larger franchise, but he's also in What If, so it wasn't completely like this huge shock. But it is a great
Sure.
moment, and especially in terms of the story, like it is one of those cameos that actually holds weight in the story. It's not just a visual thing. So I think that's worth noting for sure.
Yeah. I get you, Dill. I mean, it's a good watch and it's a solid excuse me, it's a solid movie with solid performances. But it's not a very fun watch
Yeah,
because of the weight that comes with it with that one. So I understand if like people don't want to go back to it as much. Um and honestly, I probably haven't seen it since we saw it together. So,
yeah.
I'm
It's
in the
just not
same
one
boat.
I think about much. Yeah, and if I think about
Yeah.
it, I think of Angela Bassett.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is such a good moment, and it is such a good, a good cameo. So I don't blame you at all for that. That's great. And it's funny because I'm looking at my number 3, and I realized based on process of elimination, you don't have this one either. So I'm a little bit surprised. But you did go one per
Okay.
movie, so that makes sense. My number 3 is
Okay.
also from Deadpool and Wolverine, and it's Channing Tatum.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
Gambit. It's I'm gonna make a name for myself again. Like I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
just so funny, and I think it's also this fan satisfaction that we get of like the Reed Richards, John Krasinski, where it's like you're seeing what this could have been and what you wanted to see all along, but also it has a little bit of meaning in the film because it's like these are the characters that were dejected finally getting their spotlight, but it also is just fun. It's funny, it's enjoyable. I think his performance is great, and I think it is of all those cameos. Like Wesley Snipes, I thought about for the list as Blade, but I also haven't seen the Blade movies, all of them, so I'm like not as much
Mhm.
of an definitive like Blade fan to where I was like not losing my mind. Jennifer Garner, same thing. I'm not a fan of Elektra, but this one I was like, I love Channing Tatum and I love him as this character, even though I've never seen it. I love the idea of him playing Gambit, and now seeing it, it's like obviously a different take on what it probably would have been. Like the accent is ridiculous, but I think that is what makes it better for me is that he's like kind of taking what is his last and only chance to play this role and just making the best out of it and just
Yeah.
making a fun bold acting choice. So yeah, this was immediately one of the top 3 I thought of like, yep, that's going high on the list because I just love it so much.
Yeah. No, Dill, I definitely think about this. I just think that the Johnny Storm moment in, in real time got a much bigger reaction out of
Oh
me.
yeah.
And I just think that yeah, I mean that was a crazy moment. I
Yeah,
definitely
yeah.
did want to shout out Channing Tatum on this list, but like you said, I was doing one per project. So I'm glad that he's represented on yours because it really was a good like it almost felt like a little cathartic. Like, you're rooting for him in this moment that like, oh yes, he finally got to do this. This is great. And some people clowned on him a little bit for his interpretation of the role, but I thought that it was what it needed to be. I thought that it was camp enough that it worked and he didn't overdo it or underdo it or take it too seriously. Like I thought he just gave it the exact amount of what it needed.
Absolutely. What's your number 3, Kels?
My number three is you know him, you love him. It's Trevor Slattery in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Nice.
Um, that was really, really cool. Did not expect to see him at all, obviously, because it's like, last time we saw him was Iron Man 3. Didn't know how this was going to be connected to Iron Man 3 at all. And it turns out that he's been imprisoned by them, being the jester, if you will, performing Shakespeare for them. And he just totally steals the screen in this one and is just a wonderful comic relief in this another really well done film.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
slam dunk for Marvel,
Yeah.
if you will.
This was the one that I was referring to earlier where I couldn't remember if people knew he was gonna be in it. Like, I was because
Right.
I feel like there might have been like, was his name on the poster, or was it totally a surprise? Because he's not in the trailers, but it was one of those
Yeah.
things where I could not remember for the life of me if this was a surprise or not, and I think that's why I
Yeah.
left it off my list. But if it were a
Sure.
surprise, and I also think also Abomination's a cameo in that, Wong's a cameo, like, there are a lot
Oh
of cameos
yeah,
in
yeah.
Shang-Chi. There are a lot of cameos that
Yeah.
are really good. So I didn't put this on my list, but now that you're talking about it, I'm like, yeah, it was such a if this was a surprise, which I believe it was. But I for some reason I feel like I just knew. I don't know though, maybe because like Ten Rings Mandarin, like maybe I just thought there was a chance. But yeah, you're right. Like
Mm.
because they had said that Tony Leung was gonna play the real Mandarin, that I was like, oh well, are they gonna have the fake one? Maybe I thought it was. But my number 2 is also a cameo that was theorized about. So I'm not gonna be too much of a
Okay.
stickler here. If I were to put on my
Yeah.
list, this is where it would end up. It would end up in the top 3 because I agree with you. It's such a great cameo. It's also not really a cameo because he isn't such a big part of the movie, but that's
Right.
also true with my number 2. So I'm gonna let it slide. But like I do not that I have to let anything slide. It's our list. But I also think it's like yeah, such a great appearance that you don't expect in a movie like that when you're just like, oh, this is like a martial arts Marvel film. It's like you don't ever expect that this bumbling fuck is gonna be in your movie, but
Yeah,
he
yeah,
is, and I
yeah.
love that. I think it's a really smart choice to give some comedic relief to something that desperately needs it. Because Aquafina isn't really playing the comedic relief here; she gets to be a little bit more serious, which I like. I like how they're not just resorting to her being the funny one. She has funny moments, but I think
Yeah.
it would have been unbearable if they had her also be the comedic relief and the best friend and the kind of love interest and all of these things. So I think it's
Yeah.
nice that like he can be the comedic relief and him and Morris can kind of take that and roll with it. So
Mars.
I love that. I love it. Great pick. Number 2, I'm wondering if this will be your number 1 because now I honestly I don't know if this is even on your list, but I know what one of your top 2 is because it was one of
Okay.
mine earlier. And I know what one of
Yes.
my top 2 is because it was one of yours from earlier. So I'm wondering if this is on your list or if it's not at all. Because this is also kind of like Ben Kingsley, where it's like they are supporting roles in the movie, but we didn't know they were coming. But we also kind of had
Yeah.
an idea. It's Toby and Andrew. That's my number 2. Because it's
Okay.
like I mean, like, everyone knew they were probably gonna show up, but even then, there was that slight bit of doubt of, like, maybe it is just the villains, maybe they really didn't secure him down. We hadn't seen Tobey Maguire in anything in a while. Andrew Garfield was just coming off of Tick, Tick, Boom, I believe, and, like, he was doing fine. No one really knew. He was denying it in interviews, but, like, we thought maybe, and then we saw that trailer from Germany where they, like, cut out the 2 of them, and we see a lizard get punched, and we're like, "Oh, that must have been a Spidey who got." I feel like there was so much digging
Yeah.
here that when they showed up, it was by no means a surprise, but I still acted like it was based on how hype that crowd was. So I think I got to give it the credit there. I think on rewatch, it's not as exciting a reveal, obviously, but I think in the moment,
Yeah.
the first time you saw them, even if you thought they were coming, it was the most exhilarating moment. It really was. I was so excited, and just like the second you see the other PD in the portal with Andrew, it's like, oh my god. And then
Yeah.
Toby's coming after that, but it's like, oh my god, just everything about that moment was so good. Still, even though I don't really like that movie anymore, that moment those moments, I just remember where I was. I was with you. I was with Zach. I was with a bunch of people watching that moment, and
Yeah.
I just who was it? Me, you, Zach, Lauren, James. Like it was just such a great moment with just all our friends seeing that happen. All of us who grew up on those movies, or at least knew about those movies, and it just I don't know. There's something about that that was so magical, even though it's not really a cameo because they are like, as I said, the third and fourth main characters of that movie. It's like Tom Holland, Zendaya, Toby and Andrew, and then it's like Benedict Cumberbatch and all these other people. But hey,
Yeah.
I love it. I had to put it in my top two, but it's not my number one. Because I'll talk about that in a sec. But did you have them on your list?
I did not have them on my list still.
Oh, okay,
I
okay.
Because when
Ooh,
you
I'm
texted
interested to
me and
find
you
out
were like,
who your other one is now. Ooh,
yes. When you texted me and you had brought them up, I was like, "Oh my god, I didn't even think of them." And I thought that that was probably a telltale sign that maybe they didn't leave that much of an impression on me. I mean, yes, as you said, it really was exciting. I mean, obviously the theater we were in was going crazy. We didn't hear half of the scene that was going on because of all the hullabaloo, but I yeah, this just I look back at this moment and it like makes me mad more than anything because
100%.
well, selfishly because I was very not anti, but just like didn't think it was going to happen. I was like, guys, there's absolutely no way that would be so stupid. It's not happening. And so I was kind of eating my words a little bit, if you will, because I was so wrong. And then
Yeah.
I like obviously hate being wrong. And then now I look back at this movie and I'm like, so without all of the commotion, it's really not that great of a movie when you like rewatch it.
I'm with you on that. Yeah, yeah.
So no, they unfortunately did not make my list, but I completely understand why they would be your top two in your
That's
top
fair,
two.
and it is my nostalgia also. I know you didn't necessarily grow up with the Toby movies, if I'm not mistaken, so it is one of those
Yeah,
things also that I'm like, he was my Spider-Man, so, like, seeing him back was just so exciting, but I agree with you. I think the rewatch value on that movie is very bad,
yeah,
because you don't have that crowd hype, and when you know it's coming, it doesn't hit as hard, and they make it in the movie like they give you applause breaks, and it's like when you're at home you're not
right.
going to be like applauding for 20 seconds while he just stands there with his mask off, heavy breathing and looking around like it's kind of awkward, and I think that's
Yeah,
why the
yeah.
movie itself doesn't hold up as well, but I still think their function in the movie is also very important too. Like they're not just there as a gag, like they actually give something to Tom's Peter, which I also respect, and there is great banter.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's a great inclusion, but I do agree the actual surprise of it doesn't hold up anymore. But I mean, yeah, I'm just trying to transport myself back to that. And then that's kind of why I have my
Yeah.
number one where it is. But we'll get there in a sec. Who is your number two, Kels?
My number 2 is from a TV show.
Okay.
This was a character that showed up in a not so great TV show that, had some good moments, but overall wasn't the strongest of the TV shows. But I just loved it because um yeah, it added some romance to the MCU that we don't always see. And that
Oh,
is when Daredevil showed up in She-Hulk, because
okay.
that was really exciting because they're both lawyers and now they're both super people and
Uh-huh.
they're in love. And I'm I'm like, what does this mean for like the reboot of Daredevil? I'm like, is she gonna be in it? Are they
Right.
in love? I'm I'm like, I don't know. I'm like swooning over this romance.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think it's also because we had just gotten it with No Way Home, so we knew he was coming back in some way to where it wasn't as much of a surprise. But you're right. I don't remember how much they marketed that, and even if they marketed that he was going to be in it, we didn't expect it to be this. We didn't expect like the full like love arc. So I really like that.
Yeah.
That show has some good cameos. I mean, Megan Thee Stallion is a big one in that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's true.
you know, and Mark Ruffalo is in that as well as kind of a cameo. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's got some great cameos. I think now in retrospect we should have seen it coming that the lawyer would be in a lawyer show, but it's
Sure.
still fun, and I think like you said, it could have a lasting impact. If this is like an it couple in the MCU, Wanda and Vision are no more. We need someone new. Tom and
I
Zendaya's
agree.
characters don't know who each other are anymore. So I think or
Right.
she doesn't know who he is. So I think that could be fun. Like I'm trying to think of other MCU couples. We don't really have any substantial couples in the MCU right now, right? Aside from Wanda and Vision, now they're done. Like, right? Like, there's no
Oh
like
god,
prominent
yeah,
couples in the
Jane's
MCU.
dead,
Yeah,
so
Miss Marvel, her love
Thor
triangle kind of
doesn't
fell
have
apart. You know,
yeah,
yeah. Like, I don't think we
Cap
have like a substantial couple in the MCU that is like the couple. You know, like when we had the next Avengers film, the way we had like Natasha and Bruce were the couple of Age of Ultron, and then we had like,
Right.
you know, the romance of Wanda and Vision being the anchor of Infinity War, and then like Star-Lord and Gamora also. Like I really don't think we have that now, so it could be kind of fun if that is Matt Murdock and Jennifer Walters.
Jennifer Walters, yeah.
Oh, I just won a trivia match. I'm so excited. Cool.
Just
Love that.
5-pointer.
Yeah, right. That
And I
at this rate, yeah.
and I also just love that, like, it just showcased, like, what, like, a casual, like, relationship can be to a woman in her 30s and just how, like,
Mhm.
normal it can be instead of making it, like, this whole thing of, like, "No, women have to be a certain way when they're dating," you know? I love that show for what it did for its messaging and feminism, even though it did kinda fall apart at the end.
Yeah, I
That I
think we
can
both
admit.
I think we both liked it more than most people because I think it
Yeah,
functions perfectly well as like just a fun sitcom about a lawyer. I think the problem is people
yeah,
wanted it to be an MCU project, and I just don't think
right.
it is that first and foremost. It is that, but it's not. That's not its big goal. Is to be this overarching universe building. Hex, Wanda, Agatha. You know, like it's not trying to be that. But all
Yeah,
right. Our number ones we've already said on each other's lists, but I'm very excited. So my number one's your 10, your number one's my 6. But I have the one that started it all, and I think it's important. I think now we don't think of it as
yeah.
much of like a whoa moment, but I have Samuel L. Jackson in Iron Man because he's a big A-lister at the time. Like people didn't even think he would show up at all. Plus, he has the eye patch, so comics fans knew who that was. Plus, it's the tease of the Avengers. Plus, it is the first MCU movie. It really kind of sets the groundwork for what cameos would come. Like we don't get all these cameos. We don't even get Toby and Andrew without Nick Fury showing up to show that this interconnectivity can be possible. It's something that just was kind of unheard of. You know, even though people probably thought that meant like they were setting up a sequel, but then when they were sat back and realized I'm putting together a team, oh shit, there's gonna be more movies that are gonna like build to an actual Avengers movie. Like that was such a monumental cameo that I think we all as a fan base, me, you, and everyone watching take for granted. Just the fact that this could happen. And I think that deserves its flowers. And I love how you put it on the list as like a wink, as like a nod, kind of like how I did with Stan Lee. But I put it in my number one because it really is like the Toy Story to animation or the Snow White to animation or the, you know, like it is the trendsetter for all cameos to come. And I think it's important also just because now when we look back at it, it's like, you know, that was a huge deal. So I wanted to put it at number one, even though it's not the one I lose my mind over the most. I think if I were to take each of these movies isolated and look at them on their own, in that moment, if I were a comic guy a little bit more in 2008 and I saw that happen, I would have lost my absolute shit at it. And I think going back, kind of revising history, I think that is the right number one for me as like the one cameo that stands above the rest. So Nick Fury, number one.
Yeah, Dale, I love that. I love that you made that your number one. It was honestly the first name I wrote down. I literally was like Nick Fury in Iron Man. That was the first thing I thought of.
Same.
Because you're right, it's the catalyst that starts it all. So it is an iconic moment and it will go down in history, dare I
Yeah.
say.
Dare I say? Well, let's flame on, Kels. Tell me about your number one.
So you kind of have one that's like from way back in the day, probably like the first cameo, for being honest. And I have like the most recent cameo, really, as my number one. And I
I
think
love
that's
that.
probably recency biased in the works here. But it's just I just love the bait and switch of it all, like how you think it's going to be Cap, and then it turns out to be Johnny Storm,
Mhm.
and it kind of really sets the tone for like what you can expect in the void. So it kind of only almost makes you start guessing like, oh, what other like past like Fox projects are they going to stumble along the way kind of thing. And obviously like we
Right.
see the other three we with Wesley Snipes and Jennifer Gardner and Channing Tatum like later on. And I just like don't remember a time where like I'm so glad that I did not go into that like I was completely like I had no idea what was going on. It was not spoiled for me. Sorry, Dill. And so it got a really big reaction out of me and I still remember like gasping and then like turning to you being like, "Oh my god, are you seeing this?" And you were like, "Yeah, I've seen this. Like I knew this was
Yeah,
happening."
it sucked.
So
It was a TikTok
yeah.
because it wasn't just a TikTok. It was a TikTok live. So I was just swiping through sometimes when they just put the TikTok lives on your
Oh,
FYP, and it was
yeah,
like
yeah.
them showing him in the sky. I was like, "Oh, I hate this so much."
Oh,
I really
bummer.
wanted to avoid it, but it's one of those things where I couldn't even take a few seconds to swipe past it. I just saw it. I was like, "Damn," you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was a real good one, and they really got me because he's like he's gonna say it, Avengers Flame On, and then to have him kind of like I thought that once he fell out of the sky and like broke his neck, I was like, oh okay, so then that's the end of it. But then to like watch
Yeah.
him get those like few extra moments in the film, it was just really really exciting, and I just love that Chris Evans did that for Deadpool 3 because he really didn't have to. He could just be
No.
like, I'm done. Actually, there's
Yeah,
not a number you could write on a check for me to
I
do
was
it.
about to say, yeah, I've totally forgot about the fact that, like, he was pretty much done. Like, I didn't even think about
Yeah,
that, where, like, you didn't think you'd see him again in the MCU at all, and now him and Robert Downey Jr., we're gonna see again, like, him in this, and now
right,
Robert Downey Jr., yeah, but, yeah, that's a great
right.
pick. It is one of those that I think just also because of the moment and the pacing and the timing and the direction, like, it was just a perfectly set up cameo, because
Yeah,
it's a non-cameo becoming a cameo. It's like, "Oh, Cap's here, cool." Oh, like, I loved it.
yeah,
I think it's really, really smart.
exactly.
Just a really well executed cameo for sure.
And I saw it with you, and then I ended up seeing it a second time with one of my other friends in New York. So I got to watch him react to it, which was equally as fun. You know what I mean? Because like
Mhm.
obviously I knew it was coming, but then to watch him be like, "Oh no way!" It was like, "Yeah, right? Isn't that
That
great?"
that is honestly some of the most fun, parts of going to the movies again is seeing other people react to it. It's like going to see Spider-Man: No Way Home a second time with my parents and my brother. I was like, it was so cool to see them see that. But in the
Yeah,
moment, I was like, all right, whatever. But I was like, no, I wanted to see them watch it. So I think there is merit in that. And I think if you ever sit someone down for a Marvel rewatch, like I think all these moments are going to stick out. Like, maybe not Nick Fury as much for some because they don't know who he is or what his deal is. But I also think
sure,
like Chris Evans in that sense. I mean, just Chris Evans and all his other cameos, the Matt Damon one, even the Third Identity of Moon Knight, like all these different things that I think just I wish I could rewatch again with people who've never seen it because I think these moments are important and it's kind of what MCU has been built on in recent years because their quality has been dimming, but those are the moments that people still go back to the theaters for to say like, oh, I'm interested to see what other vendors show up, or I'm interested to see what surprises there are, like Easter
yeah,
eggs. Like that is kind of why people go back now, not because they're like, I need to know what happens to Logan after he dies. Like I don't think anyone's thinking that. It's more so I
right.
want to see Hugh Jackman or I want to see these characters. So I think that's kind of why the movies do continue to still make a lot of money and still have their relevance. It's why Wicked is doing well right now. It's not just because it's a crowd pleaser and it's fun for the whole family, but it's also because there are fans of the musical that want to see like other musical theater cameos. There's people who love The Wizard of Oz who want to try to connect the dots of, oh, who's the Tin Man, who's the Lion. Like I think that's kind of the fun of it is playing a little game when the quality when it may be a more universal like kind of studio thing, you can find little bits and pieces to cling on to if you're not as absorbed with the rest, which I think is important. It's a fun thing that sets the MCU apart from a lot of the rest. So I'm glad you told us this topic, Kels, because it was a fun list
Yeah,
to make. It was a fun
yeah.
conversation to have. Yeah.
I was kind of nervous I wasn't going to be able to like think of many, but as soon as I like kind of extended the parameters for us, like, oh, it doesn't just have to be like a one scene and done.
Hmm.
It can be like someone who sticks around and just an
Yeah.
unexpected character you
Like
didn't think was
Trevor,
gonna
the
show
Spider
up.
Man. Yeah. Hmm.
Exactly.
Right.
And oh, what was I gonna say? Oh yeah. And I think say what you will about Deadpool and Wolverine. Obviously, like we've talked about that movie to death on this channel, but I think that it honestly did the best in its marketing with holding back on its surprises because obviously like it showed us a
I
bunch of
agree.
cool stuff in the trailers leading up, but I think like it was one of it was honestly the same excitement and like surprising factors that I only really remember experiencing in like Endgame,
Yeah. Yeah, where you
because
just don't know anything because Ed Game was just the
yeah,
first 20 minutes in the trailer. Yeah, I agree with you there.
right.
I think also, I was upset about the Daphne Keene of it all, but now in retrospect,
Mm,
I'm like, you know what? If that's the one they're gonna spoil, like I'm fine with that because honestly, you should have known it was coming if they were gonna reckon with Logan's legacy and have cameos in the
right.
movie. It would have made sense. Like I'm glad they didn't spoil Elektra or Blade or Gambit or Chris Evans. Like I'm glad they kept it secret, and I
Yeah.
do think again, so many of the other movies have failed at that. Where like the Spider-Man villains, we couldn't put any of them on our list for cameos because they were all spoiled in the trailer. Same
Mhm.
as like, and honestly, I feel like they did spoil Professor X in the trailer. Now that I'm thinking about it for Doctor Strange, but I think that was a surprise to you because you didn't watch that final trailer. Because I remember
Mm.
I told you not to watch that final trailer, but
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's like there's so many great moments that I think would have been even greater moments had no one known they were coming. So I think that's something Marvel should learn going forward is that the less you show, the better, because they're gonna go anyway. Unless it is a hard sell like Eternals or Shang-Chi, like then yeah, show Abomination getting into a fight with Wong in the ring. If that's gonna take them to the theater, but like you don't have to spoil everything. Don't. And I think that's really
Yeah.
cool. Like, and I hope that's a lesson they learned because of Deadpool and Wolverine. Because I agree with you. I think they spoiled Daphne Keene, and that was it. And I think that's okay. And I think that they had so many other fun surprises that made it worthwhile. So, yeah, that's a good note to the marketing. So, marketing, if you love these moments as well, don't show them in your fucking trailers.
Yeah.
That's my PSA.
100%.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, Kels, on these lists? Any plugs and anything else to share?
I don't think it would have made my list, but I just thought of another one.
Mm,
Um, what's his name? Beast in the Marvels.
yeah.
In the post-credit scene.
Yeah.
I'm sure if we just went through post-credit scenes alone, there's probably so many
Yeah.
cameos.
Well, another one I thought about was also Chris Evans as Cap in Homecoming, the PSA video.
Oh,
But even
yeah,
then, I'm
yeah.
like, they're fine. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah. I'm sure we could come up with so many more, like, if we think about it long and hard, like
right.
Bucky at the end of Black Panther is one.
Yeah,
Falcon at the end of Ant-Man is one. But even then, it's like, I think it's more fun when like you haven't seen these characters in a while, or they're characters from other properties like Professor X or Gambit or Johnny Storm. So yeah, I
yeah.
think we came up with a good list, and we put the people who needed to be on there: Nick Fury, Stan Lee. Like we collectively talked about everyone who mattered. I think, unless there's more that
And
we're
you know what?
forgetting.
You know what moment I thought of too, but I didn't include because I wasn't gonna branch out beyond the canonical MCU was in
Mhm.
Deadpool 2 when he's at the mansion and he's like, "Why is it only ever you here? Like we couldn't get the money to get the rest of them." And then like Nick, what's his name? Nick Holt. Is that his
Yeah,
name?
Beast, Nicholas Holt. Yeah,
Nicholas Holt. Uh, I'm on a nickname basis with Nick Holt. Nicholas Holt closes the door, and then you just see like all the other X Men standing behind. I like thought of that randomly, and I was like, well, I'm not going to
yeah.
include that.
Yeah. Yeah,
That
I
was
think
so
if we were to
fun.
branch out, yeah, there would have been some other good ones. Like Bruce Campbell has a cameo in every single Spider-Man movie. He's like the theater usher. He's like the announcer at the wrestling match. So
Wrestling
there's a lot of
match.
fun ones in a lot of
Yeah.
those in a lot of those movies, and I'm sure X-Men has a ton of them too. At some point, I'm sure even '97 had one or two at some point. I think Professor X in and of himself was a cameo in '97 because everyone thought he was dead. Anyway, I think it's a fun topic, and I'm glad you brought it up because I also was a little worried. I was like, "How are we gonna fill this?" Because like none of them really. Now looking back, I'm like, yeah, okay. But I think re-talking about them and talking about the first time I saw them, it kind of rejuvenated that excitement that I remember
Yeah.
having in these moments. So, very good list, Kels. That was all a Kelsey project. Give her a round of applause. Good
Ah,
job, Kels. Um,
thank you.
where can
Thank
they
you.
where can they find you out there, Kels? Before I tease next week.
You can find me on Instagram at Kelsey A. Kilpatrick. You can follow my TikTok. It's at Kelsey A. Kilp. Or my letterbox is the exact same thing at Kelsey A. Kilp.
There you go. And you can find me at Dylan_Randazzo at Twitter or Dylan Randazzo 417 at TikTok, the Dill Pickle Movie Network TikTok, Dill Pickle Movie Network on YouTube, Dill Pickle Podcast, and this podcast on its own feed. And next week will be our last kind of like episode proper of the season. We're going to be doing our ranking of all the projects that came out in the calendar year 2024 from Marvel. So not just MCU, but Marvel in general. So Madam Web will be on there. We'll be talking about Venom 3, as well as the MCU stuff we got, like Deadpool and Wolverine, Agatha All Along, X-Men 97. And we'll do kind of our ranking of all those from this year, not including Craven, of course, because that comes out the week after, which will be our episode after that, which is going to be our Craven review, Craven the Hunter. Can't wait. And then the week
Yee.
after that will be our final episode of the season, which will be our trivia match with Jake, or no, not Jake Tato. He's the tramp. It's Joe Farrelly taking on Corey Ross for a seat against Jake Tato in the tournament title match, which will be the kickoff of season 5. Season 5. That's crazy. We are
Crazy.
officially longer running than like most TV shows, so that's crazy. But yeah, Kels, that's it. Any last parting words to our viewers?
No. Have a good week.